Well, what's up again, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and welcome to, I guess you could say, the first real installment of my new series of videos, which I'll be doing probably for the rest of the year, titled Top List Tuesdays. And as I'm sure you can tell from this title, today I'll be sharing with you my top 5 personal guilty pleasures. Now, as video game season is about to kind of start up in February next week, I felt the need to want to look back and pick a couple games that I know a lot of people, including probably some of you guys out there, really hated playing, but for some reason or another, the game just so happened to work for me for one reason or another. So starting off real simple with number 5 on my list is the game that I'm sure a lot of you might not have known even existed, and that is Enter the Matrix. Now, from what I've heard from people who hate this game, the reason a lot of people hated this game was because it didn't focus on the main protagonist, which at the time was Neo, in which we would eventually get a video game based around Neo called Path of Neo. But I actually kind of enjoyed playing Enter the Matrix. It certainly had that Matrix-like feeling. The soundtrack was definitely from the movies. It took part during the events of Matrix Reloaded, which also a lot of people hated, which, you know, for some reason or another, that movie also works for me. And I actually don't mind playing as two characters that aren't really featured heavily in the films, Naomi and Ghost. I actually like stories that don't focus on the main storyline. And by doing that, it allows me to understand events happening in the background to help illustrate what exactly is going on in the front section of the story, which is the main trilogy of the Matrix movies. Which is why I'm a real big fan of the Star Wars EU, because it just helps illustrate why the events playing in the mainstream are so important. But, you know, it works. I thought it had a pretty solid story. It definitely went into depth to a lot of elements that they didn't really flush over in the original films. And I personally had a lot of fun playing it. And you also get to drive those little, well, not little, those really big hover vehicles that they have in the Matrix movies. I forget what they're called, but I thought that was a pretty fun section. Going on into number 4 is a game that I recently went over doing a research for one of my Versus Series matchups. And I picked Devil May Cry 2. I gotta be honest, I actually don't really know why a lot of people don't like Devil May Cry 2. I mean, everyone's talking about, oh, 2 is terrible, but if you really sit down and play it, true, there's anything particularly special about it, but it's not a bad game. It's a good hack and slash game. It definitely feels like a Devil May Cry game. I can only say the only things that I would say are a little bit disappointing is that they don't really develop the main antagonist enough, and some of the boss fights just take a long time to do because they're pretty repetitive. I mean, there's not a lot of strategy to them. You just do the same move over and over and over again for 30 minutes and then you win. So, yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid installment in the Devil May Cry series, and I think it's a lot better than that shitty DMC shit that whatever Ninja Theory or whatever the hell they're called, or I don't know what the hell they were trying to do with that franchise. And I really, really want them to do a sequel. Devil May Cry 5 take place after 2, but heck, that's just me, and I had fun playing it. Going into number 3, I picked Resident Evil 5. Now, look, I started playing Resident Evil with Resident Evil 4. That was my first entry into the Resident Evil franchise, so I didn't get a chance to play Resident Evils 1, 2, and 3, and the Code Veronica series, and all the Outbreak series. I didn't get to play them until after I actually beat 5. But I think the biggest problem that I think a lot of people have with 5 was that it didn't really have the survival horror aspect. It felt like a straight-up action movie. And I don't mind action, because horror just doesn't work for me. As far as I can say, I can officially state that only 3 games in the history of video games have ever actually been able to legitimately get some serious scares out of me. So I was actually kind of happy that Resident Evil and Capcom decided to just throw that element out of the way and just focus on straight-up action. I know that sounds like, you know, a bit of a traitorous thing to say, especially if you're an old school Resident Evil fan, and I understand why they don't like it, but for me, I had fun with it. I actually didn't mind the co-op party, although a lot of people really say the AI was terrible, which, you know, I gotta admit, Sheva's AI was actually kind of helpful, and in many sections was actually a lot helpful than playing with a human character. And if you really want to see broken AI, play as Sheva and see how Chris's AI reacts. I mean, that's broken AI. So, yeah, I mean, and this would even play into Resident Evil 6. I actually really enjoyed Resident Evil 6. Some people didn't, but it all started with Resident Evil 5, the whole action genre, and, you know, if they decide to do Resident Evil 7 more action-based, then I'm on board for it, even if it's not very horrifying, I would say. Going on to number 2, I picked Final Fantasy Dirge of Cerberus. Now, you guys know that Final Fantasy 7 is undoubtedly the most important video game I have ever played. Not my favorite, mind you. The most important game I've ever played. And they've been able to build an entire franchise on its own just from that one game. And one of the games that they happened to make in this, collection of Final Fantasy VII related games was Dirge of Cerberus. Now in this game, it focused on Vincent Valentine, which was a kind of mysterious character in the original Final Fantasy VII game. And I like that this game actually went into depth with his backstory. And it actually took place after the events of Advent Children. And I think it really threw a lot of people off that we had a Final Fantasy third-person shooter, which, for some reason, I love third-person shooters, and this one really didn't work. I really have no idea why people didn't like it. I think it was just the fact that there is a third-person cover-based shooter in an RPG franchise, which is just crazy. I mean, it's like adding a puzzle game to a Mortal Kombat series, or turning Need for Speed into a fighting franchise. I think that's why a lot of people didn't like it, because if you actually get a chance to actually go back or maybe see some old gameplay footage of that game, it's actually quite enjoyable. And I think that the ending made Vincent turn into a real serious badass, and that's why I really enjoyed Dirge of Cerberus. And that takes me to number 1. This one, I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? And that is, number 1, my most guilty pleasure video game I've ever played is undoubtedly Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe. Okay, let's get the elephant out of the room. I know that the fatalities are garbage. I know. They really, those are some of the worst fatalities they've given Mortal Kombat characters. And even some of the DC heroes have some pretty pathetic looking heroic brutalities. But, it works. I mean, the story was pretty interesting. I mean, having this element that was mixing these two worlds together, and then it gave you this special ability called the Rage, which pretty much enhanced all your physical attacks and pretty much made you invincible for a few moments. I thought that was a really cool gameplay element. I like how they were able to mix Darkseid and Shao Kahn into Dark Kahn. I thought that was a pretty cool mixture. And just to see my favorite fighting franchise cross over with my favorite comic book franchise into one maybe not such well-constructed game, but it was fun. I had fun playing it. I know a lot of people hate this game and pretend like it doesn't exist, but it did exist, and it did happen. I did have a lot of fun playing it, and if any of you guys actually happen to have a copy of it like I do, and if the servers were still on, I would be up for playing it against any one of you. And those are my top 5 favorite video game guilty pleasures. And I really would like to know, what are some games that a lot of people, including myself, may badly despise, but for some reason you really enjoy it for one reason or another. Please share your list in the comments down below, and if you like this video, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to track me in my future videos and top list videos every Tuesdays. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.